Drink responsibly. Drink with Nurse Isabel. If your head gets in a spin, laughter gets love. Safety first. Forget the clap for the nurses. Safety first. Drink with a nurse. There are several Lalande wines. It's not just one chateau, it's like a region. A terroir. Or rather a series of terroirs. Forget this Muppet and new Muppet friends that I'm trying to impress with this wine. You need to let it breathe, you need to let it aerate. Quite different to irate in the back of this skiing oars. Child having a tantrum. Chateau La Croix Chagnou is a classy wine where with each vintage the approach is that the wine is resolutely ready to drink today, but still with a good aptitude for development in the bottle. True for all vintages, but vintages do vary. 2018. Harvest with little low quality and absolutely miraculous, really. Despite the surprising weather conditions until the beginning of summer, the high level of sunshine after that, until the beginning of autumn, allowed the grapes to reach an absolutely extraordinary maturity. The Lalande Chateau were able to draw out very high quality tannins, complex wines, very pleasant taste of fruit. But it's got a more ambitious profile. The young Americans combined with the powerful fruit give the blend of purplish purple, black, pure and seed fruit with a juicy, powerful texture. It's really achieved. The blueberry mixes that we get with all vintages of this Lalande wine that blend nicely with the more roasted notes conferred by the aging. Even Big Bird's going to like this one. It's got finesse and density while still maintaining delicious and refreshing. It's vinified for a modern, uncomplicated consumption. It's just for pleasure. The Cabernet Franc always elegant, the Merlot always charm and voluptuous, without heaviness. To balance those changing climatic conditions of the area, the harvest quality, moderate freshness, maturity, concentration, sugars and acidity. This La Croix Chagnou, perhaps some vintages with a note of raspberry, but this vigneron always manages to produce a balanced, classy wine with a velvety texture. Drink responsibly. Drink with Nurse Isabel. If your head gets in a spin, laughter gets love. Safety first. Forget the clap for the nurses. Safety first. Drink with a nurse. It was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the ascent. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. Mist covered both that and the surrounding mountains. Presently a breeze dissipated the cloud, and I descended upon the glacier. From the side, where I now stood, Montenvert was exactly opposite, at the distance of a league, and above that rose Mont Blanc in awful majesty. I remained in a recess of the rock, gazing on this wonderful and stupendous scene. The sea, or rather the vast river of ice, wound among its dependent mountains, whose aerial summits hung over its recesses. Their icy and glittering peaks shone in the sunlight over the clouds. My heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy. Mont Blanc yet gleams on high. The power is there, the still and solemn power of many sights, and many sounds, and much of life and death, in the calm darkness of the moonless nights, in the lone glare of day. The snows descend. Upon that mountain none beholds them there, nor when the flakes burn in the sinking sun, or the starbeams dart through them. Winds contend silently there, and heap the snow with breath. Rapid and strong, but silently, its home. The voiceless lightning in these solitudes keeps innocently and vapour-like broods over the snow, the secret strength of things, which governs thought, and to the infinite dome of heaven is as a law inhabits thee. And what were thou, the earth and stars and sea, if to the human mind's imaginings silence and solitude with vacancy? We have returned from visiting the glacier mountain there, or as it is called, the Sea of Ice, a scene, in truth, of dizzying wonder. The path that winds to it along the side of a mountain, now clothed with pines, now intersected with snowy hollows, it's wide and steep. We arrived at Montanvert. On all sides precipitous mountains, the abodes of unrelenting frost, surround this vale. Their sides are banked up with ice and snow, broken, heaped high, and exhibiting terrific chasms. The summits are sharp and naked pinnacles whose overhanging steepness will not even permit snow to rest upon them. Lines of dazzling ice occupy here and there their perpendicular rifts and shine through the driving vapours with inexpressible brilliance. They pierce the cloud like things not belonging to this earth. The vale itself is filled with a mass of undulating ice and has an ascent sufficiently gradual even to the remotest abysses of these horrible deserts. It is only half a league, about 2 miles in breadth, and seems much less. It exhibits an appearance as if frost had suddenly bound up the waves and whirlpools of a mighty torrent. We walked some distance upon its surface. The waves are elevated about 12 or 15 feet from the surface of the mass, which is intersected by long gaps of unfathomable depth, the ice of whose sides is more beautifully azure than the sky. In these regions everything changes and is in motion. The vast mass of ice has one general progress, which ceases neither day nor night. It breaks and bursts for ever. Some undulations sink while others rise. It is never the same. The echo of rocks or of the ice and the snow which fall from their overhanging precipices or roll from their aerial summits scarcely ceases for one moment. One would think that Mont Blanc, like the god of the Stoics, was a vast animal, and that the frozen blood forever circulating through its stony veins. We dined, the three of us, on the grass, in the open air, surrounded by this scene. The air is piercing and clear. We returned down the mountain, sometimes encompassed by the driving vapours, sometimes cheered by the sunbeams. We arrived at our inn by 7 o'clock. The everlasting universe of things flows through the mind and rolls its rapid waves. No dark, no glittering, no reflecting gloom, no lending splendour, wherefrom secret springs. The source of human thought its tribute brings, of waters, with a sound but half its own, such a feeble brook will oft assume. In the wild woods, among the mountains lone, where waterfalls around it leap forever, where woods and winds contend, and the vast river over its rocks ceaselessly bursts and raves. Some say that gleams of a remoter world visit the soul in sleep, that death is slumber, and that shapes the busy thoughts outnumber. Of those who wake and live, I look on high.
Okay.
Has some unknown omnipotence unfurled the veil of life and death, or do I lie and dream? And does the mightier world of sleep, spread far around and inaccessibly. It circles, for the very spirit fails, driven like a homeless cloud from steep to steep, that vanishes among the viewless gales, far, far above, piercing the infinite sky. Mont Blanc appears, still snowy and serene, its subject mountains, their unearthly forms, pile around it, ice and rock, broad vales between, of frozen floods, unfathomable depths, blue as the overhanging heavens that spread, and wind among the accumulated steeps, a desert peopled by the storms alone. Save the eagle brings some hunter's bone, and the wolf tracks her there. How hideously its shapes are heaped around, rude, bare and high, ghastly and scarred and riven. Is this the scene where the old earthquake demon taught her young? Ruin? Were these their toys? Or did a sea of fire envelop once this silent snow? None can reply. All seems eternal now. The wilderness has a mysterious tongue which teaches awful doubt, or faith so mild, so solemn, so serene, that man may be, but for such faith, with nature reconciled. Thou hast a voice, great mountain, to repeal large codes of fraud and woe, not understood by all, but which the wise, the great and good interpret, or make felt, or deeply feel. The fields, the lakes, the forests and the streams, ocean, and all the living things that dwell within the daedal earth, lightning and rain, earthquake and fiery flood and hurricane. The torpor of the year, when feeble dreams visit the hidden buds or dreamless sleep, holds every future leaf and flower the bound, which from that detested trance they leap. The works and ways of man, their death and birth, and that of him, and all that his may be. All things that move and breathe with toil and sound are born and die, revolve, subside, and swell. Power dwells apart in its tranquillity, remote, serene, and inaccessible. And this, the naked continents of cards on which I gaze, even these primeval mountains, teach the adverting mind. The glaciers creep like snakes that watch their prey from their far fountains, slow rolling on there, many a precipice. Frost and the sun, in scorn of mortal power, have piled dome, pyramid and pinnacle, a city of death, distinct with many a tower and wall impregnable of beaming ice. Yet not a city, but a flood of ruin. Is there, that from the boundaries of the sky rolls its perpetual stream, vast pines are strewing its destined path, or in the mangled soil, branches and shattered stand, the rocks drawn down from yon remotest waste have overthrown the limits of the dead and living world, never to be reclaimed. The dwelling place of insects, beasts and birds becomes its spoil, their food and their retreat forever gone. So much of life and joy is lost. The race of man flies far in dread. His work and dwelling vanish like smoke before the tempest's stream, and their place is not known. Below, vast caves shine in the rushing torrents, restless gleam, which from those secret chasms in tumult welling meet in the vale and one majestic river, The breadth and blood of distant lands forever rolls its loud waters to the ocean waves, breathes its swift vapours to the circling air. Oh, fauna of the Alps. Animals. 30 years ago in Switzerland, bearded vultures were reintroduced after extinction, bred back. And the same with wolves. Strangely, I'm not really going to offer an opinion on this one. The bearded vulture used to be widespread in parts of the Alps, but was hunted to extinction towards the end of the 19th century, that's the 1800s. In Switzerland, in cantons, and obviously they move around throughout the Alps. You see plenty in France since reintroduction. The latest birds that have been reintroduced were hatched in Spain and France. The two young vultures will help expand the gene pool within the alpine population, which has suffered malformations linked to inbreeding. Ahead of the release, the beards of the vultures were bleached for identification and monitoring purposes. They're the only living species that mainly eats bone marrow from animal remains. Both bearded vultures and wolves, being vulnerable species, have expensive backbreeding facilities to keep the species strong and get stronger. While you're hiking now, you should perhaps be aware that humans are also now threatened by the wolf. This chap, Joseph Otto, a town councillor in the Alps de Haute-Provence, was checking the local water supply when he was surrounded by 5 wolves, one of which charged him. The former soldier managed to hit the aggressor away. After 30 minutes, the pack withdrew, but that would have been a tense 30 minutes. The incident was the first of aggression towards humans since the wolf came back to France in 1992. The wolves seem to be losing their atavistic fear of humans. The attacks on livestock and close encounters with humans will logically only multiply. The national wolf pack, just in France, which now numbers around 1,000 species, is enlarging at between 13 and 20% each year. The lupine advances across France is magnificent. Hunted to extinction in the 30s, the wolf returned 30 years ago with a small number of Canis lupus crossed all over the Alps from Italy. Wolves have been seen in over half of metropolitan France's 96 departments. Wolves spread naturally annually. The previous year's cubs depart the main pack to seek territories elsewhere. They've been spotted on the outskirts of Paris and the environs of Dieppe. They've swum rivers, nipped across autoroutes. At the top of the Châtelard and Gueulaz funicular, a vast trough of water in its own V between a perpendicular valley to the Arles. Wolves also spread unnaturally. Their progress across France is state-aided. In 2018, Macron's centrist government published a 100-page wolf action plan, announcing its intention to increase the number of the predators on the mainland to 500 by 2023. The move was intended to increase biodiversity, or at least the modish type of biodiversity propagated by celebrity ecologists. So Macron could increase his green credentials. To the surprise of no one in French agriculture, the target figure of the number of wolves was easily doubled by the national wolf pack in that time span. After all, the wolf in France has rigorous protection, like the rest of the EU signatories in the 1979 Berne Convention and the 1992 EU Habitats Directive. The protected species status means that they can only be controlled by lethal means in exceptional circumstances. Effectively, a flock has to be under direct attack for a farmer to shoot a wolf justifiably. To assuage farmers, the state has agreed a 10% annual cull, undertaken by the Wolf Brigade, from the Office of Hunting and Wildlife, which manifestly failed. Ministers have now raised the threshold to 19% annual cull of wolf population. This is unlikely to satisfy French shepherds, or indeed France's dyspeptic taxpayers. In the event of a wolf attack, livestock breeders receive compensation for a replacement animal. Paris grants subsidies for the building of electrified wolf defences, reinforced human presence, they call it, assist the shepherds in the breeding of training of livestock guard dogs, which are often the Pyrenean mountain dogs, the patou, like in the film. The French government had already financed 5,000 livestock guard dogs and was sloshing out another 38 million in anti-wolf measures and compensation. The cost of protecting sheep from wolves is exploding. 90% of successful attacks take place on farms that have already adopted the protection measures. In a sober, pessimistic report, wolves are probably taking advantage of their legal status as a strictly protected species. They should never have told the wolves. They have learned to circumvent methods of herd protection. It's almost like a challenge. The boom in the patou, cuddly, huge dogs, is also causing trouble. They only look cuddly. Shepherds may need a dozen dogs to protect their flocks, and in 105 people reported being bitten by a Pyrenean mountain dog in 2022. A lawyer counts shepherds amongst his clients, said there's been a multiplication of conflicts linked to dogs and a notable increase in lawsuits against sheep farmers. Meanwhile, the compensation for dead sheep is inadequate and only covers mortalities. There are indirect impacts of predation. Stressed survivors lose weight, miscarry, reduce their milk supply, and sometimes refuse to graze on the places where they've experienced a wolf attack for 3 years. One breeder who was reimbursed €1,850 by the state has estimated her losses at €24,000. UNESCO recognises the value of a pastoral farming environment and the meadows that it creates rather than the forest of the boar and the deer that the wolf is intended to keep down. The return of the wolf isn't simply a problem for France. The German wolf pack is growing by 40% annually. The Netherlands, to deter wolves from approaching humans, authorities are experimenting with paintball guns. In Sweden, licences to kill wolves are being issued to local hunters in blatant disregard of the EU's wolf protection legislation. Faced with farmer protests, the European Parliament last autumn voted to downgrade the wolf's protection status to facilitate more culling. The Commission, however, appears disinclined to take notice, although one assumes that Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, might be at least lend a sympathetic ear. Dolly, her pet pony, was killed by a wolf in September. I know I shouldn't find that irony amusing. The horse was harmed. And especially in France, it seemed, I don't know about Sweden, hunters don't have a great reputation. They seem to have a knack for shooting hikers and members of their own family, unfortunately. Go hunting with your nephew and you might not end up coming back with a nephew. Shooting just one or two of the pack tends to break up the pack and form more breeding pairs, is another problem. So are hikers going to be hindered by walls of electric fences like a prisoner of war camps for domesticated livestock? 15,000 livestock a year are lost to 140 wolf packs. One female wolf has taken 120 ewes in a year. If you're tottering around a trendy alpine resort, Courchevel, Chamonix, with your little pet, toy-sized dog, you might find it vulnerable. If you're taking young children on a hike, they might become vulnerable in the future. Easiest to prey first, isn't it? But don't go harming anyone's pedigree. Imitation wolves. We left the fair margin of the beauteous lake of Geneva and entered the Alpine ravines, tracing to its source the brawling Arve river through the rock-bound valley of Servox. Beside the mighty waterfalls and under the shadow of the inaccessible mountains we travelled on, while the luxuriant walnut tree gave place to the dark pine, whose musical branches swung in the wind, and those upright forms had braved 1,000 storms, till the verdant sod, the flowery dell, and the shrubby hill were exchanged for the sky-piercing, untrodden, seedless rock, the bones of the world, waiting to be clothed with everything necessary to give life and beauty. There is nothing of Geneva itself in it that can repay you for the trouble of walking over its rough stones. The houses are high, the streets are narrow, many of them on the ascent, and no public building of any beauty to attract your eye, or any architecture to gratify your taste. The town is surrounded by a wall, the 3 gates of which are shut exactly at 10 o'clock, when no bribery, as in France, can open them. La Clément, Lake Geneva is at our feet, and a little harbour contains our boat, in which we still enjoy our evening excursions on the water. Unfortunately, we do not now enjoy those brilliant skies that hailed us on our first arrival to this country. An almost perpetual rain confines us principally to the house, but when the sun bursts forth, it is with a splendour and heat unknown in England. The thunderclouds that visit us are grander and more terrific than I have ever seen before. We watch them as they approach from the opposite side of the lake, observing the lightning play among the clouds in various parts of the heavens, and dart in jagged figures upon the piny heights of Jura, dark with the shadow of the overhanging cloud, while perhaps the sun is shining cheerily upon us. One night we enjoyed a finer storm than I had ever before beheld. The lake was lit up, the pines on Jura made visible, and all the scene illuminated for an instant, when a pitchy blackness succeeded, and the thunder came in frightful bursts over our head amid the darkness. Firmin Abauzit, a Protestant theologian born in Uzes, after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, took refuge in Geneva, travelled and entered Chamonix Valley before Saussure. Abauzit made a map of the glaciers of Savoy. Unfortunately, his map was never finished or was destroyed in the papers Abauzit burned on the order of the Bishop of Uzes, Benedict de Saussure and Boret. La Rochefoucauld de Duc d'Anville, Goethe, Victor Hugo, Jérôme Lalande all made the arduous trip to Chamonix. Little changed since Roman antiquity, and the pastoral visits of bishops from the 11th to the 15th century to the priory of Chamonix. The Geneva scholar Saussure dreamed of installing his instruments at the top of the white mole hill that is Mont Blanc and collect alpine plants. Mineralogical explorations needed the boldest crystal seeker guides. Voyage dans les Alpes. Geneva to Cluse occupies a chapter. Cluse to Sallanches, a chapter. Sallanches to Chamonix. From Sallanches, the charabanc demountable carriage gives way to the ass. The pack donkey scrapes against the rock of the path to one side and overhangs the precipice to the other. This is the route to Chamonix. Boret was to make literary characters of Chamonix hunters, and in terms of popularity made Chamonix and Zermatt known. Him and his red umbrella, and powdered snow described as cream, firing off pistols and throwing grenades to hear and feel the echoes of the valley between Bonneville and Cluse was great amusement in these days. Cluse to Sallanches, waterfalls, Nantes de Alpenaz, but if your horse gives up half an hour before you reach Sallanches out of sheer fatigue, you're going to arrive there late at night and miss the waterfalls. Splendor. Another day was taken to journey up past the bridge of Saint-Martin-Servoz, where locals are trying to sell graphite. A tour de lac of the town of Saint-Pierre, which was submerged, and the bridge of the Montes Pellissier. The village of Fouilly and Montpellier, crossing the river Alpes and arriving at the priory, marks the start of the Chamonix Valley. Wyndham, an Englishman in 1741, with experience of Egypt and the Arabic Levant, popularised the glaciers as the coolers. The priory, the only place to stay in town. Or rather, Chamonix, the village on the northern edge of the river Arve. Napoleon I's Josephine was to visit Chamonix, and Napoleon III and Eugene. Things had improved by the time of Victor Hugo's visit in 1825. In Sallanches, you leave your car. From this village to the priory of Chamonix, the journey is made in charabancs, harnessed to mules and formed of a single transverse bench where one is seated sideways under a kind of small leather canopy. The 4 panels can be lowered in the event of a storm. This new way of travelling warns you that you are passing, in a way, from one nature to another. Here you are entering the mountain. The round, flat hooves of horses no longer suits these rough, steep and slippery paths. The wheel of ordinary cars would break in these narrow paths, constantly torn by points of rock and broken by torrents of water. You need light and solid carts that can be dismantled in difficult passages and cross them with you on the shoulders of guides and muleteers. So far you have only seen the Alps, now you are beginning to feel them. Empress Josephine was carried by 8 men, 2 gangs of 4 in rotation, on a chair, raised up. For Victor Hugo, still half a century later, there was no more traced route than the rushing torrent following a stream by mule, rolling stones ringing under their feet. Napoleon was so appalled that he built a road worthy of his name. The Empress was able to stay in what's now the casino. Saussure reached the summit of Mont Blanc in 1760 that he'd observed from the top of Brevant. 20 years later, Paccard and Balmat were the first 2 locals to make it to the top of Mont Blanc. In 1770, Mademoiselle Couturand opened the first tourist hotel, Le Hôtel d'Angleterre. Though popular, it took 9 days for the huge number of British tourists to get to Chamonix. It was still a destination for the summer for mountaineers, painters, writers, Byron and Shelley, sporting enthusiasts often. The first Winter Olympics in 1924 was held in Chamonix, and cable cars just a few short years after. Suspended trains, they were called. In 1946, the ice grotto was carved into the mer de glace. 1955 got us the Aigues de Midi cable car. In 1965, the Mont Blanc tunnel to Italy, of the Aosta Valley. 39 souls died in the 1999 fire from a flour and margarine truck. Chamonix is a small town of 9,000 people, which becomes 60,000 visitors in the winter and 100,000 visitors in the summer, often cycling and hiking, mountaineering. Apart from the Victorian palaces, well spaced out, there's no real terraces. There's the modern hotel of the Alpina, imposing its vastness in the centre of town. But Chamonix is very much a valley rather than a conurbation. Thousands of small chalets separated out into old villages, all accessed by bus. Traffic grinds everything to a halt. Vallorcine up on the border, Argentière, Chamonix town, Les Ouches. are separated by the elevated motorway, the aqueduct that delivers you down to Saint-Gervais-les-Bains, 70 kilometres an hour. Still hugging the side of the rock and with a wall of death hairpin or two. Thus thou, ravine of ours, dark, deep ravine, thou many-coloured, many-voiced vale, over whose pines and crags and caverns sail fast cloud shadows and sunbeams, awful scene, where power in likeness of the Arve comes down from the ice gulfs that girds this secret throne, bursting through these dark mountains like flame of lightning through the tempest. Thou dost lie, thy giant brood of pines around thee clinging, children of elder time, in whose devotion these chainless winds will come and ever came to drink their odours and their mighty swinging, to hear an old and solemn harmony, thine earthly rainbows stretched across the sweep of the ethereal waterfall, whose veil robes some unsculptured image, the strange sleep, which when the voices of the desert fail, wraps all in its own eternity. Thy caverns echoing to the Arve's commotion, a loud, lone sound no other sound can tame. Thou art pervaded with that ceaseless motion, thou art the path of that unresting sound, dizzy ravine, and when I gaze on thee, I see, as in a trance sublime and strange, to muse on my own separate fantasy, my own, my human mind, which passively now renders and receives vast influencings, holding an unremitting interchange with the clear universe of things around, one legion of wild thoughts, whose wandering wings now afloat above thy darkness, and now rest, where that, or thou art no unbidden guest, in the still cave of the witch posy, seeking among the shadows that pass by, ghosts of all things that are, some shade of thee, some phantom, some faint image, till the breast from which they fled recalls them. Thou art there. Now, I don't really know how to approach the next subject other than that I'm obviously full of nerdy and excuses that I put down to my fear of success. Really quite deep-rooted fear of success. How are your French swear words? I started this YouTube channel with the intention of highlighting the beauty of what it is to become infatuated by someone just completely randomly during any random day. During COVID, I started getting strikes. Why? I really don't know. YouTube thought I was talking dirty. I really wasn't. A friend of mine's wife used to wind me up something rotten with, "You'll know if she's the one." The one? What is the one? After 2 children and a divorce, I saw her. She had a twinkle in her eye for me. I just so wanted to say to her, "Am I the one?" But I did the sensible thing like anyone would and ran away screaming. She was always going to get back with the husband off and on anyway. And it's pretty much come round to the anniversary of me meeting who I have thought might be the one. I don't know if this Belgian blonde beauty is available. She might be in a long-term relationship or working with a large group of women. She may not even be fluid. She might have completely ruled out half the population. I worked with her, sort of. There was a large group of women worked in the office and a large group of men worked as drivers. I don't know why it was set up that way. but it almost counted as a mixed workplace. There was an attractive and very charming blonde woman that ran the place, and this younger person in question really did seem like the boss's daughter. A wonderful concept in itself and could tip the balance. The boss had had children later in life, a child, but the office was her girls. But I think Goldilocks was her favourite. No, that's a terrible thing to say, but why I say that, we had to do a sort of driver training, which is really quite tiresome. But you sit patiently and sort of have a little chat with these new people that you can be your friends for the season. We had to carry around all the documents and a little backpack that we were given. And we were supposed to be having a starters party, a freshers fair, I don't know what you call it really. We were having a little restaurant meal and a few drinks anyway, because we'd all just started, get to know you type thing. But my bus was a bit late. I was driving the bus. Now I keep everything in my pockets, phone, wallet, keys, anything I ever need. I'm not used to carrying a handbag around with me. So I'm off to get deliriously drunk with my new mates and forge new stories with my passport, driver's licence, new employment document, Swiss self-free visa thing in a backpack. And we're taken along after the civilised thing that the boss then disappears off from and lets us loose on the new town. We get taken off to the sweaty dive bar with walls wallpapered, floor to ceiling with band posters and theme nights. It's just so obvious that I'm going to get deliriously drunk and leave all my backpack and documents needed for the season in a bar. Now, this bar isn't the only option in town, far from it, but I think they did end up staying there quite a while. But it might have been just one drink. I didn't stay for one. I was parked on the outskirts of town and staying in the van. I was half walking back to the van to leave the documents secure and then come back. Or I just decided to go, get up early in the morning, do the little test thing that we had to do, and then everything was safe. The approach seemed in no way obvious and easy. A stumble into conversation clumsily could be forgiven, but while she did seem forgiving, I was attracted to her seriousness and her strength. She was focused mainly on 2 or 3 of the other girls. I don't know how well she knew them. She might have been new for that season herself. I was a little bit confused how she spoke perfect, beautiful French, and such eloquent English. She was an educated girl. Obviously she was a woman. What I still find quite intriguing was how people have their hair done in curls, almost ringlets, and then they brush them out. She'd had her sort of ringlets done, and it looked slightly 1980s, but I think she felt a little bit uncomfortable about the indulgence of having her hair done at the hairdresser's. I think it would have been at the hairdresser's. Looked like she'd done it very well if it wasn't. Very few of us pamper ourselves the way that we should do, and some people pamper themselves much too much. But knowing how girls talk amongst themselves, I was in this dive bar thinking that there was an essence of Married at First Sight, the reality TV show. I was voting to stay in the show. I did make my excuses to the head honcho lady before I scurried off with the tail between the legs. Complimented her on an iron brew earring. But that was the mistake. There was no need for it. I could have stayed up all night, and what was I going to be doing all night if ours would have closed and we'd have... Anyway, the test for the Seasonaire to drive you from airport to resort, I could have done it without sleep. Done it before. Done a whole season. All male environment. Bitching and arguing with the Croatians. And Thomas the Tank Engine, the flight controller, doing a cameo. Is logistics. But with a big team of young people, both bosses did well to set up an agreeable environment. This latest one, I just wanted to dive into and roll around in. Every time I went into the office, I'd be on my best, most entertaining, charming behaviour, but toning it down. My season-long trick was going to be, not a trick, but a roll. During tense, busy weeks, the girls might sort of bicker a little bit between each other over their IMAX screens, but I'd walk in and many a varied compliment all around, with that extra special one for word grease the wheels, you know what I mean. You can imagine I'd always be disappointed if she wasn't in when the rotors just didn't coordinate. But I had to phone in one time after dropping someone off. The wealthy London lady with her young son. She'd been really quite flirtatious. Not in an ostentatious way, but in an educated way. But it was like I was a horse being ridden, reined in before I was released for a jump. She was saying to me it's good for her young son to see her like that, with someone like me. Anyway, so while I'm on the phone, hello, it's me. The object of my affection answers, and I think they might have arranged it. There might have been a little bit of setting up, but it depends who was. Yeah, it might have been for a big old laugh. Before we can do a bit of off-task banter, sorry, I've been teaching children recently, someone reverses into my van. This is in the first week of working. I'm completely stationary, handbrake on, don't think even the keys are in the ignition. Oh no. What's the matter? She's a caring person. I haven't even started telling her why I'm oh-knowing. She cares, she certainly seems to care. And it's so easy to share your hardships with her. That won't ever be needed. That's the point of being able to share. It won't ever be needed. Just backpedaling a little bit to the introductory night out. If I hadn't been such a big baby and scurried off with my documents, do you think there'd have been a shunt that night? If there had been something close to a shunt that night, do you think I wouldn't have got the shunt in the van? I did. The big boss had sort of let me in, or given me a clue as to what might happen, even on the Skype interview when I was battling in the Cotswolds. The barn, the Grange, and the ski town that I bought it is an hour and a half away, even on a dry day. Just the folds of the mountains takes you hours away on a snow day. Greeted with a good dump in the morning, you'd be in trouble getting to work. A week later, my attractive blonde boss calls me in. Has this got anything to do with me going a bit early and having free time in Geneva? Which was fine at the old firm last season, but
I'll change over to my winter tyres.
Turned into a bit of a battle.
With these windscreen wipers
No,
going on the
nothing to
time,
do
I
with
can't
that.
see all that
Walking
much.
through town, can't go to the usual cafe that we go to for anything, any meeting. There's no office space, even for a radiator or underfloor heating. She takes me down a back alley to an alternative restaurant, bar, cafe thing. Much quieter, much more dimly lit. You can't see those lines that sunglasses would hide. She says that Switzerland, because I haven't earned sorry, this is a bit complicated. Because I haven't earned a year's wages in my home country in Europe, I can't work in Switzerland. So I haven't found it easy to get a job in France, but if you've got a job in France, you stick at that job. So I wouldn't be doing seasonal work really anyway. The only, well, what a lot of people find that they have to do in the mountains is work seasonal jobs, and then they claim unemployment benefit for a lot of the rest of the year. I didn't do that. I was working in England. Yes, I should have been working on the barn, on the Grange. But hey, you know, when interest rates triple your mortgage, it's horrible. You get cautious. If the Swiss won't give me the visa to pop into the airport for a couple of 3 hours every day, she can't use me. She's got to let me go after 2 weeks. Wonderful 2 weeks. A freezing 2 weeks. Sleeping in the van in the snow. Pretty much the centre of town is much easier with, insert advert here. The blonde boss lady sort of gave me my cheque, I suppose you'd say, a detailed list of what I earned. Not too bad, she was sort of saying. And of course we'll need your clothing that was off me that I was actually wearing at the time. Shall we do that now? And I sort of made a bit of a gesture to undress in front of her. She seemed amused. She communicates a lot with very few expressions. But she's not just conveying thoughts. There are like distinct micro tells, I think you call them, that she is making the effort to do for me, I think. You must get through so many staff in that type of industry. So when I'm going into the office to hand in my clothing, I'm making a good effort to tug at the heartstrings, use words like gutted. You know how I'm talking through you, not to you? That's a bit cutting, but you know, when you're talking to a gossipy environment, you can almost pitch what you say to who's going to hear it and what the effect you want from those hearing it. Selective rather than people just ending up gossiping about whatever's coming out of your mouth. If there's going to be gossip, try and direct it to your advantage. Tugging at the heartstrings, but the blonde boss was trying to keep me around in town. I think she might have had a bit of a plan. She might have been alleviating a conscience. She might have just been trying to increase the population of the tourist resort by 1. Though not much snow at that point in time. I had a ski pass for the season at a reduced price in the bag. Stay for New Year. Well, perhaps I'd have met up with the team at New Year. At the end of the season, after getting season-long emails about an occasional thing, not daily things, it was quite curious. She might just set the team up and let it run. I'll stick with girls in the office are very competent, intelligent, qualified, and all those things. But that one Goldilocks that I was wanting to soothe the randonnée ski muscles of, perhaps with oil, might have been at the end of season close party. So it would have been better for me to turn up at the end of season close party, not invited, I think, rather than gone along at New Year to some random thing and been pitied. Well, I think it's possible I've got the skills to transform pity into something else. Yeah. Certainly drivers are very transient in the transfer driver marketplace. 2 seasons is really quite a lot, though you're supposed to have a 2-season minimum. Follow the racing line, low input driving, snow tyres, do all the work. Anyone can do it, really. There's a certain amount of being sociable. I could do a whole YouTube channel on the customers and the interactions with the customers. Now, blonde boss lady sends out a round robin to ask for people's photos of the season, their stories, their social media. Can we have access to your social media so that we can use it in our social media? I have to confess, I am embarrassed that I'm doing YouTube. But if I had enough million, what they call, subscribers, then perhaps that'd get me the girl.
I don't live in a mansion. My room is high above the street. But after all, although it's small, it makes a very snug retreat.
Carcassonne, Béziers, Perpignan. It's a while since we visited this region. Le Clap is definitely the more expensive wine of the area. It's got the cuddliness and her muppet reminiscing. It's quality. It's not just the toxins that make your heart beat faster with this one. Grenache, Mourvèdre grape, and Syrah. Luminous, silky wine tannin at one end of the taste and intense bouquet at the other. It smells beautiful. Spicy notes amongst rich red fruits. Fleshy, balanced, and elegantly ensembled. I don't always let myself loose on such opulent wines. You'll be pleased that I've noticed that some of these Le Clap get up to 15.5% alcohol by volume. No, I haven't. I'm still with my roots. I'm a grassroots audience. This is a Languedoc-Roussillon wine after all. It's south of France. It's going to get warm. It's going to be the fruit, the sugars. It's all there. And not burnt out. It's good winemaking. Hospitalet is sat around the table talking about a Danish television series, really good series. But there is a whole hospitality complex to this vineyard, this chateau. 5-star hotel, restaurant, not far from the beach. Hospitalet, la clap, nurse, plus wine equals love. The acrobatics of the heart, the swirling of the wine in the glass. And deep thoughts, the inheritance, and the contemplation of spending that inheritance after a bottle of wine on a countryside property in the mountains, perhaps. Well, you'd be scared stiff to release those funds otherwise. A bit of Dutch courage for your French speaking is just going to lubricate the negotiations. Notice how I had the class there to avoid any sexually transmitted diseases jokes. It's getting to that time of year again. Snow and ice on the roads. And all around. The two-tone shades look beautiful, but don't let them get film noir on you. And Volkswagen Caravelle can have the advantage of four-wheel drive and snow tyres. Snow tyres are amazing things. It's all about the compound of the rubber, we call it, don't we? And a little to do with the tread. But none of those things are going to save you. They'll help you. But my advice to you as an experienced driver in severe snow and ice conditions. Snow, very different. Thick blanket that you're squashing down, really quite grippy. Ice, yeah. Assume that it's going to be guesswork at some point. My advice to you, low input driving. What do I mean by that? Well, a little bit like if you're trying to do the smoothest driving and keep your customers very comfortable in the back there. And also if you're not trying to spill a drink that's on the counter, expensive Grand Cru. I'm still talking about your customers here, not yours, as the driver. Take the racing line through any curves and bends. So the racing line, you'll be out wide, perhaps kissing the apex and letting the car run wide again. Obviously, what you're doing on the accelerator makes a difference. Anything on snow, and particularly ice, very little steering input, as little steering input as you can, and taper off the throttle, taper off your foot. Do as little as possible on your foot in accordance with what you're doing on the steering wheel, but don't lose the momentum, don't stop, keep moving even if it's at a crawl, especially if you're in snow, but very much so if you're on ice. You stop on snow, you dig in. You'll have to do a lot of shoveling even before you can get your snow chains on or your snow socks on the wheels. It is difficult to say how much momentum you want to keep going on ice. You just have to feel for it. It'll depend on the gradient of the slope and how polished the ice is by those that have gone before you. One thing I will say though, when everything's a blanket of white, it can be quite easy to find the edge of the road. You'll notice it quite quickly, but your customers will get nervous, or your passengers will get nervous, especially if they're on precipice side of the caravel. Now, if you do find yourself, or not all precipices as steeper as another, lower slopes, if you're off over the edge, it's grassy, you want to stay as shallow as you can, but making sure you're nowhere near rolling. If you're too shallow down the gradient, you will roll, despite the weight distribution of the vehicle. If you go too steep, you'll smash the front up when you get to a road again after a hairpin or whatever. But what you need to take from this: low input driving, maintain momentum, don't hog the centre of the road because someone else will be coming the other way. But equally, watch out for the rumble of the edge of the road. Low input driving, no erratic steering, no erratic throttle, and you'll be fine. But make use of those technological aids that we've got these days. Here we're making our way to the mountains from Chamonix in central eastern France. Taking the direct, shortest route, most economical route. Don't believe Google Maps with its eco route. You're not doing any braking. I don't know what they're thinking. Taking the back roads because I've got to visit a phone shop, one of the few that are still doing the company that has now doubled my monthly subscription. I have to have it because it's one of my few proof of addresses. Still a long way to go, but the snow is building up. Stopping pointlessly for the phone thing, we witness a wedding in a biggish town in the absolute middle of nowhere. Wild local drivers, they have to go through the mountain roads just to get out of this sizable town with everything. South of Lons-and-Saunier. But I noticed the freeze break that's built up around the tyre. Splatterings of crud off the road just freeze between the wheel arch and the wheel. That's got to affect fuel economy. Occasional rain acts as acid on the snow. But the higher you go, the greater the build-up. You can base your journey on that. If it's raining down here, it's snowing up there. Temperature dependent, of course. Pleased to arrive, put it that way. Amazing residential foyer with the boîte as part of this bed and breakfast. The car's going to be parked for the generation. No, a bit of gentian, aperitif, a bit bitter, a digestive. Generations of monks can't be wrong. Does William Morris wallpaper and a bit of costume jewellery, is that really the friendly face of hunting with these ibex heads on the wall? I'm not going to worry about it too much. French hunters seem to shoot members of their own family more than they shoot animals. Now, the snow in France stays mainly off the plains, but this dump's a bit of an exception. Mont Blanc, while being one of the most undistinguishable mountains, though very high, it almost looks like a flat prairie meadow to the top, is completely undistinguishable anyway because of the fog. Now, one of the main clandestine motivations for this trip is the grooming of a novice. Someone who's never been skiing before, never really had much exposure to walking on the snow and the ice. Perfect powder conditions here. But my grooming for skiing is met with a frosty reception. Sledging is the place to start, wouldn't you agree? Oh, it's a toddler's board, it's sledging's for children. Toddlers is when you learn to ski, it didn't help. I'm getting icicle daggers looks. A dragon tamed because it's chained seems to be a motif in the local church. A church to sliding around on ice and hiking seems to be the stained glass window theme. We stop and light a candle to preserve our little limbs. But first, a little more delay and distraction. Posh coffee at fancy restaurant for breakfast.
Come on, into the sun.
Eyeing up the immaculate, disguised cakes. I am distracted. But eventually we have to move on. The slide. Apologies, concern. Waterproof clothing oft worn. But we are well dressed for the occasion, and the addition of the giant pump sliding up goes for clearness and off the ice cream. I feel the trick here is to eliminate it and stop before anyone gets frightened or frustrated, and encouraged to go back to it. It's not a one-off for life. Just trying to explain here why it's a short bit of excitement for a very long trip, but hey, we've all known that before. A lively restaurant where all the locals go, that's always a good one to pick. Traditional Savoyard cuisine, full of released relaxation, relief type noises after a day of excitement and fear and all those surroundings. And for us, by our own standards, it could have all gone terribly wrong for me. How was it for you, darling? Let's go again. Next time, let's go a bit more hardcore. And we're on our way back again. Snow even heavier, completely wasting all that powder. I didn't get a look in with a lift pass. It was all about the relationship this time.
Pintu farovalu levro, pintu farovalu, pintu farovalu levro, pintu farovalu.